3:39 on your hometown station, KHTS. Henry Mayo has taken over the Santa Cruz Valley. They've expanded their Newhall facilities, beautiful parking structure. They've opened up the giant fitness and health center on Town Center Drive, right where I believe Spectrum used to be. I mean, it's huge, and it's a big part of it is and are the health education classes that really are open up to the entire community for no charge at all. Rhonda Reese is a respiratory care practitioner and also teaches a free community class called Successful Self-Management of Your COPD. And Rhonda joins me in studio right now. Rhonda, thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course. How long have you been teaching the class?
It is now going on its second year.
Really? Awesome. Very cool. So explain to me, what is COPD? I've heard the term pretty much for years. I mean, decades. It's been around my whole life. I've been hearing COPD, but I'm not exactly sure what it is.
That's a good question to ask, and that's a question that is frequently asked by patients. They come in, they say they have COPD, they go home and like, okay, so what is that other than a lung problem? So in this course, we explain COPD, meaning it is a chronic condition. It's obstructive, and pulmonary means lung. So it's a chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. What that means is that you have difficulty with your airway. What happens is that you have subsets of COPD, meaning you have chronic bronchitis, which means your airways become irritated and inflamed. And therefore, when that happens in the airways, then mucus builds up. And that's why a lot of patients will have that chronic frequent cough they have. Then at the end of your airway are these little gas exchange chambers called alveoli. And what happens with them is that they lose their elasticity, therefore leaving that stale gas in there and not getting it out. And that's what we call emphysema. So some patients can have both, or some patients can have one.
And is this something people are genetically predisposed to? Because you're talking about the symptoms and basically the effects of what people go through when they have COPD. And it sounds like a lot of it can also be brought on by your lifestyle, whether or not you're a smoker, your diet, whether or not you're exercising.
I'm glad you brought that up, Aaron, because the leading number one cause for COPD is smoking. Genetic plays maybe a 2% factor. 95% is by smoking, where another factor is also air pollution, fumes, chemicals, that of the workplace, like those that were in the military or those that are in the Army, airplanes, anything to do with chemical. But 95% of your patients that have COPD are from smoking or former smoking.
It is baffling that people are still smoking.
Yes, and that's another good point that you bring up, is because in this class, we not only talk about what COPD is, and we give them a detail of that, we also talk about, because I am one of the certified tobacco treatment specialists at Henry Mayo, which is a free service that we offer to patients to come in, and we talk about what are we going to do to help you to quit this habit? What are we going to do to make you feel healthy? When you have COPD, you do not recover from COPD. It is always a chronic condition. So it is not curable, but it's certainly treatable.
Right. It's not reversible, but you can definitely stunt the effects of it.
Yes.
And what about vaping? Does that pose as big of a threat to people as smoking does?
That indeed is. And
Really?
FDA does not recommend it, and our program does not recommend it as well.
Do people with COPD, especially the ones in the classes, the ones that are coming into Henry Mayo, the hospital, are they still smoking? Do people kick it immediately once they've been diagnosed with this really scary disease?
I would say so far, most of the people, by the time they get to me, so they understand the disease and what they need to do, have already stopped smoking. Those that have not, it's a very low percentage right now in the class. But when they do, some can quit cold turkey because they think, oh my gosh, I don't want to die.
Right, it scares them
Or
straight.
it's an addiction. Nicotine is an addiction. So there are plans that we give them. It's just like COPD is not a one life fits all with their symptoms. It's the same with smoking. When you come to see me about this habit that you have, then we do it around your lifestyle. So what are things in the day that trigger you for that cigarette, and what are we going to do to avoid it? So those are the things, just like with COPD, we look at what is your lifestyle and what are we going to do to help you.
We're talking with Rhonda Reese, respiratory care practitioner, and also the instructor of Henry Mayo Fitness and Health's free class, Successful Self-Management of Your COPD. The next class is coming up 2 Tuesdays from now, March 19th, 11 to 12:30, only an hour and a half. And it could change your life. What do we learn during the class?
Okay. So there is so much more that even there are some that are repeat to the course because it's impossible to be able to do what we need to do to help them. Our first part, what we do is basically explain, just like I did to you, what is COPD. Then we go into details explaining the symptoms, understanding that cough, wheezing, sputum secretion, all of those are part of COPD. But just because you have a cough doesn't mean you're COPD. We then talk about if you understand what COPD is and what you are on a daily basis when you're good, we talk about an action plan. And that's the number one thing in the first part of the course we talk about is an action plan. Just like anything you do in life, you always have a plan. You need to know that with COPD. You need to know what your disease is and how it works for your body. So this action plan is like a stoplight. You've got your green area to where you're saying, this is what I am on a normal day. My secretions are this, my cough is this. These are the medications that I am required to take on a daily basis. Now, when you start to have other symptoms, then there's that little yellow light or yellow section. And at that point in time, you're starting to say, gosh, I'm coughing more. Uh-oh, I'm getting more secretions. Uh-oh, I'm running a fever. And it's from there that you have to decide, is this what we call an acute exacerbation of my COPD? Or is it that it is influenced having a respiratory infection? Is it pneumonia? So all of these things they're told to keep track of. So that lets them know, do I need to add more medications? Then you have that red light to where it's like, okay, no matter what I'm doing with my rescue medications, my breathing, believe it or not, breathing is a major thing that they learn in the class, the different types of breathing pattern to help them get control of that breathing to determine, is this COPD exacerbation or is this an anxiety or a stress issue, which we all deal with. So those are the things that we do in class. We sit down and we learn about that. So our first part, we talk about that. We talk about the importance of having a plan for your life, lifestyle changes. The second part of class, we talk about medications, understand how to take those inhalers, because that can be pretty scary for some, or they can think at the time when they're in the hospital or at the pharmacy, okay, you do it this way. Then by the time you get home, you're like, no, how did they say to do it? I think I need to do this. And just like any other person with any other diagnosis, whether it be diabetes or hypertension, if you don't take it correctly, what's going to happen? You're then going to have that exacerbation of that COPD, and you're going to say, but I'm using the inhaler. So we take a step-by-step on how to use each one of those, and also how to recognize what is my rescue inhaler and what do I need to take on a daily basis? Because you could look at me or another person and think, oh, they're a normal person, but they could have COPD. But in order to keep up from that flare-up, they have to have a maintenance medication, just like anybody with diabetes or hypertension, any other disease. They may not feel it, but the moment they start not having that routine of medication, what happens is sometimes they don't feel that effect of not taking it until they're having to frequently use that rescue inhaler.
Right. Successful self-management of your COPD taught by our very own. No, not our very own. She works at Henry Mayo Newhall, Rhonda Reese, who is a respiratory care practitioner. The next class is coming up 2 Tuesdays from now, March 19th, and they've got a couple classes coming up next month as well, April 9th and April 23rd. If you want more info on this class to register or just browse the entire list of classes offered through Henry Mayo Fitness and Health, visit henrymayo.com/classes, and you can also give them a call, 661-200-2300. That's 661-200-2300. Rhonda, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Aaron. I appreciate it. Thank you.
3:48, time for a quick break. Stay tuned. More music and traffic coming up.